Charlie Kirk is from Turning Point, USA.
Charlie Kirk.
He's, spreading his message on college campuses. He's doing it while he's using social media.
Give it up for Charlie Kirk!
Young and restless. And now 18-year-old Charlie Kirk is saying enough is enough.
See, you're being called upon to be a leader.
It's an enormous responsibility.
But I'm very proud of my husband.
Charlie Kirk, founder of TPUSA. You've built an actually enormous thing.
It feels good to win back our country.
There's only one Charlie Kirk in the world. He's one of one.
Before all of this, the packed stadiums, the White House visits, viral clips, he was just a young dreamer with no money, no connections, no social influence. Just a teenager with a vision and a relentless determination. He would go on to build one of the biggest movements in America. But how did he do it? Today, we unpack the 4 moments that made Charlie Kirk. We start off by going back to when Charlie was just a young high schooler.
Grew up in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. Always was a conservative Republican, growing up around a lot of leftists and liberals.
And honestly, that's really where I got my kind of focus on politics, because I was always naturally conservative, loved America, loved the values that our country stood for, and I never understood why you'd want to deviate from that. And then I found myself trying to convince these ideas to people that had never heard or never met a Republican conservative in their entire life.
I live in an area where most people around me, they agree with me. And I can tell them that I'm a Christian, a conservative, that I'm pro-family, that I'm a patriot, and they would probably agree with me. But Charlie, he didn't have that. He was a Christian conservative growing up in Chicago, one of the most liberal cities in the country, under the Obama years. That is as stark a contrast as you can get. But it was in that contrast that he learned something that most people will avoid their whole lives: how to get comfortable around people who disagree with you. And Charlie, he did not realize this, but that was training, being around people who completely disagree with you for what was going to come later. Because you and I, we know Charlie going out onto college campuses, to events, debates, where everybody disagrees with him. But he was comfortable. It was his natural setting. For moment 2, it almost seems silly until you realize that it's the blueprint Charlie needed to build what he would build later on.
I went to Wheeling High School, and one of the most favorite things everyone loved was they had these warm chocolate chip cookies that they would make. And they were 25 cents all throughout high school, and all of a sudden, senior year, they go to 50 cents. I was outraged about this, and so I got a group of friends together, and it turns out another school across the way at Buffalo Grove High School also had the same thing. So we started this Facebook group that was a total joke called Students Against Cookie Inflation, and it kind of took on a life of its own. It was bipartisan, it got written up in all the local papers and stuff, and in some ways that was like a precursor
to your big door.
The guy who arguably was the biggest voice that got Trump reelected in 2024 got to start by campaigning for chocolate chip cookies. But that's the point, because Charlie didn't start by just walking onto a national stage. He had to start in the cafeteria. And you see that with so many other leaders, people who run billion-dollar companies. They start in a garage, by themselves, with a half-made prototype. But it's the process of building from that small place into something huge. And that spark led to him founding his first political group, SOS Liberty, a prototype for what would come later, Turning Point.
SOS, what does that mean? It is the international cry for help. Our generation is drowning in an ocean of debt.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars that my generation is going to have to pay off through interest, high taxes, and a stagnant economy. We here at SOS Liberty believe that if we do not change the conversation back to us, the kids that are going to have to inherit this debt, that our economy will be stagnant for years to come.
He was only 18 years old, my age, going on Fox News. And you might say, Fox News, big deal. But it was. Because today, most people, we get our information from X, podcasts, YouTube, whatever. But back then, cable news was huge. It was where most people got their information. At this point, you'd assume Charlie was on his way to a massive career in politics. But Charlie had his sights set on something much different than politics.
My whole focus was to go to West Point. I applied, and I didn't get in, and ended up being the best thing that never happened to me. I remember feeling free, because the idea of 4 years in the military academy and 5 years of mandatory service, that's 9 years. Then I thought to myself, wow, I now have 9 years to go basically do what I want.
Rejection had reframed Charlie's life. No West Point, no plan B. And that brings us to our third moment that made Charlie, where he decided to put off college and instead go and build something. So he hit the road and he spoke any and everywhere he could. And at one of these events, he would have a conversation that would change his life forever. That conversation was with Bill Montgomery. Bill sat at one of Charlie's events, listening to speaker after speaker. And then Charlie walks up. And when he heard Charlie speak, he knew he had to talk to this kid.
He walked up to me at an event that I was speaking at in high school still. And he said, after he heard me speak, he said, "You can't go to college." I said, "And who are you exactly?" He said, "Whatever you're doing, it's going to be bigger." He said, "You're going to start a youth organization that's going to catch the whole world on fire." I said, "Yeah, okay, sure."
It was in this moment, this conversation, that made Charlie who he became. If Bill didn't go up to Charlie, Turning Point USA would not have existed. And at that moment in Charlie's life, he had all this doubt. He was rejected from West Point. He, against all odds, decided not to go to college, which was frowned upon. And he had no idea what was going to happen next. His life could have gone in a million different directions. But this one interaction solidified what he would go on to build. So Charlie and Bill teamed up, and they founded Turning Point USA. So, Turning Point is founded. They have their vision, their name, their mission, and you would think that at their first event, the turnout would have been amazing. It would have been a huge success. But what actually happened?
I think we had like 4 people show up, which are just kind of like my local friends.
Most people in that situation would quit right there. But Charlie, he knew quitting was not an option. He just needed time to prove what he knew he had with Turning Point. Because Charlie knew every successful visionary has to go through the seasons of looking foolish before they get to the season of being polished. And with that, Turning Point started to become more and more polished. The milestones stacked over the years. Early campus interviews, small summits, working to become a major movement. And then 2016 arrives, and Donald Trump decides to run for the President of the United States, becoming one of the most polarizing political figures in modern history. And Charlie was about to be thrown into some of the hardest work he'd ever seen.
I can say from the moment that President Trump got elected, college campus activism from Turning Point USA side doubled, tripled, quadrupled almost overnight. And it emboldened college conservatives to stand for conservative principles, even more so pre-Trump.
Momentum was building, but so was the opposition, maybe even more so.
And so instead of trying to actually debate and have a discussion and dialogue, they want nothing. They do not want to ever have a discussion. They would rather silence conservatives.
Charlie had identified the problem, which leads to our fourth moment, where Charlie realized the power of having open debates, giving the opportunity to 2 people who completely disagree to have an open and honest conversation.
When people stop talking, that's when you get violence. That's when civil war happens.
And he was right. Charlie never stopped talking, even when protesters showed up, when there were threats, when people were booing him, when it would have been easier to just put down the mic and walk away. He kept talking because he had courage.
Courage is what's missing in our country. We have a courage crisis right now. I want you to commit yourself to a life of courage. Courage is doing the right thing when you don't know how it's going to work out.
Charlie was bold, he was fearless, and he was willing to talk to anybody about his faith and share his values. He was one of the most influential conservative voices in America, and he has inspired millions of young Americans today. What can we take away from his journey, from the moments that made him? If you feel a calling towards something like business, politics, something creative, start now. Even if you start with nothing, like Charlie did with 4 people in the audience. Keep building, because you never know. What you build, that legacy, could outlive you, just like Charlie's legacy. The moments that made Charlie Kirk are sure to teach us something as we prepare for the moments that will make us.